The command center hummed with controlled urgency until Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's patience snapped. "Increase the volume, Private Chun," he commanded, irritation clear in his voice. The unassuming woman in standard-issue fatigues leaned toward the radio console and spoke 6 words in a foreign tongue that changed everything. The effect was immediate. The duty officer's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the concrete floor. Senior analysts froze at their workstations and faces drained of color throughout the facility. No one had expected a radio operator to understand ancient Pashto dialects. No one had expected the quiet woman from Signals Intelligence to reveal a crisis decades in the making. No one had expected the truth. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story captivated you, please consider subscribing. We share powerful stories of unsung heroes every week. The underground command center buzzed with the constant hum of electronic equipment and muted conversations. Banks of monitors cast blue light across concerned faces, illuminating maps dotted with red threat indicators and green friendly positions. The air carried the scent of strong coffee and electronic circuits, mixed with the tension that came with monitoring active operations. It was 0300 hours on what had begun as a routine night shift at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, buried beneath the Afghan mountains. Private First Class Maya Chun sat at her assigned radio monitoring station, deliberately unremarkable in her standard combat uniform and regulation headset. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight military bun, no jewelry visible except for her dog tags. Early 20s, with an alert face that spoke of intelligence rather than ambition. Her dark eyes moved constantly between multiple radio frequencies and computer screens, while her presence demanded nothing from the chaos around her. To a casual observer, she might have been any junior enlisted soldier, a recent graduate from Signals training perhaps, or another face in the endless rotation of personnel. She occasionally made notes in a standard military logbook, her handwriting neat and precise. Unlike the officers and senior NCOs who filled the command center with their rank insignia and combat patches, she wore no visible markers of specialized training or experience. Just a soldier, it seemed, with a basic security clearance and an assignment to monitor routine communications traffic. The operation underway involved a joint rescue mission for Captain Maria Santos, missing for 72 hours after her convoy was ambushed during Operation Desert Shield. The mission had made brief updates through encrypted channels, search patterns established, local contacts engaged, and then radio silence from the primary search team 6 hours earlier. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran intelligence analyst with something to prove, coordinated the communications effort with practiced efficiency, moving between workstations and checking status displays throughout the operations floor. Captain Santos had clear protocols to follow regarding emergency procedures, Rodriguez explained to the duty officer, his voice carrying across the communications bay. Her decision to deviate from the planned route directly resulted in the convoy being exposed in hostile territory. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes sat rigid at the command console, his face a careful mask. A decorated officer with 20 years of service, he looked exhausted somehow in his desert camouflage utilities, as if the weight of the missing persons case had physically aged him in recent days. Maya watched it all, her expression revealing nothing. Only the occasional adjustment of her headset suggested any emotional response to the ongoing crisis. When the duty officer called for a communications update, heads turned in mild surprise as Maya raised her hand slightly from her position at the monitoring station. Private Chun has been tracking secondary frequencies, Master Sergeant Rodriguez announced. She may have additional intel on local militia communications. She moved to the central briefing area with a deliberate precision that seemed at odds with her junior rank. Something about her bearing, spine straight, steps measured, chin level, caught the attention of a gray-haired colonel seated near the main display. He frowned slightly, studying her with newfound interest. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, sharp-eyed and methodical, watched her with narrowed attention as she prepared her report. The colonel was known for his no-nonsense approach to intelligence gathering and operational efficiency. Today, he wore his authority like a burden, his desert uniform crisp despite the early hour. "Please state your findings for the record," instructed Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. "Private First Class Maya Chun, Signals Intelligence Specialist," she replied. Her voice was soft but clear, her military bearing perfect. Master Sergeant Rodriguez began his questioning, and Maya's responses were factual and precise, but delivered in such a measured, quiet tone that Lieutenant Colonel Hayes soon grew visibly impatient. Several times, the communications recorder had to ask her to repeat her statements. Private Chun, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes finally interrupted. The entire command staff needs to hear your intelligence clearly. Please speak up. Yes, sir, Maya responded, barely raising her volume. Master Sergeant Rodriguez continued. Private Chun, can you explain your monitoring activities on the secondary communication frequencies? I've been tracking local militia radio traffic and cross-referencing communication patterns with known hostile frequencies, she replied, her voice still frustratingly soft. I've identified several anomalies in the standard communication protocols used by local insurgent groups. And what were your findings? I determined that the radio traffic suggests coordination between multiple militia groups that normally operate independently. I also noted significant increases in encrypted burst transmissions from grid sectors adjacent to Captain Santos's last known position. Did you document these communications? Yes, I logged all intercepted transmissions and attempted linguistic analysis on unencrypted traffic. Was this analysis reviewed by intelligence? It was not forwarded beyond my immediate supervisor. The intelligence officer, Major Patricia Voss, approached for additional questioning with a skeptical demeanor. Tall and imposing with prematurely silver hair that lent her an air of distinction, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to challenging questionable intelligence reports. Private Chen, what specific language training qualifies you to analyze militia communications? I completed basic language training for Dari and Pashto during my initial intelligence course. And what level of proficiency? Her tone suggested the answer would confirm Chen's limitations. I achieved intermediate proficiency ratings for both languages. Maya responded evenly. Major Voss smiled thinly. Private Chun, how could you possibly understand the complexities of regional dialects and coded communications when you've been monitoring radios for only 6 months? Something flickered across Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's face. A brief shadow of recognition quickly suppressed. He studied Maya more intently now. Objection to characterization, Master Sergeant Rodriguez called out. Private Chin's analysis should be evaluated on merit. Sustained, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes replied, his eyes never leaving Maya. Major Voss adjusted her approach. Let me rephrase. What specific field experience do you have with Afghan regional dialects and operational environments? Maya paused before answering, her eyes briefly meeting those of the gray-haired colonel near the main display. My background includes some practical application of language skills, she said carefully. Could you be more specific? That information involves previous assignments that may not be relevant to current operations. Major Voss looked to the commanding officer. Sir, if the private lacks relevant field experience with regional dialects, her interpretation of intercepted communications should be considered accordingly. I'll allow the line of questioning, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes ruled. Private Chin, please provide more detail about your relevant experience. Maya's expression remained neutral. My previous language experience involves classified training programs. How convenient, Major Voss remarked dryly. So we're expected to give weight to your linguistic analysis without knowing your actual qualifications to make such interpretations? I'm reporting on communications I intercepted and analyzed using established intelligence protocols. As the questioning continued, Maya responded with increasingly precise details about communication encryption methods, frequency analysis techniques, and linguistic markers that made several intelligence officers in the command center exchange glances. She referenced specific dialect variations, tribal communication patterns, and operational security measures that seemed beyond the knowledge base of a standard signals intelligence operator. When shown a map of the region where Captain Santos went missing, her eyes lingered on it a moment longer than necessary, her composure wavering almost imperceptibly before returning to professional detachment. Do you recognize this terrain, Private Chin? Major Voss asked. Yes, it's the sector where Captain Santos's convoy was ambushed and her current search area. And your analysis of communications from this region proved to be, what exactly? The intelligence you gathered failed to prevent Captain Santos from going missing in the first place. Maya's voice remained steady. The communications I intercepted indicated increased militia activity in adjacent sectors. My recommendation for enhanced security protocols was documented in my daily intelligence summary. In the command center, the older colonel with gray hair and multiple combat deployment ribbons watched Maya with growing intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration as if trying to place a half-remembered voice from intercepted radio traffic. The early morning hours passed as Master Sergeant Rodriguez returned for follow-up questions, asking Maya about specific radio protocols used during the search operations. Can you explain the standard communication procedures for a search and rescue operation of this nature? Rodriguez asked. The search teams would have established primary and secondary communication windows with base operations, she explained, her voice still frustratingly soft. Standard protocol requires regular check-ins and confirmation of search grid coordinates at predetermined intervals. And if those communications were compromised or interrupted, the quick reaction force would deploy using alternative communication channels after primary communications were disrupted, utilizing frequency hopping protocols on encrypted networks, she explained with a level of technical precision that raised eyebrows among the communications staff present. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes leaned forward, his patience visibly wearing thin. Private Chen, I've asked you repeatedly to speak up. This command center cannot properly evaluate intelligence it cannot hear clearly. I apologize, sir, Maya replied, her volume barely increasing. The older colonel in the command center now sat forward at his workstation, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. Recognition seemed to be dawning slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to alarm. Major Voss seized on the colonel's frustration. Perhaps Private Chin's reluctance to speak clearly reflects her limited confidence in her own analysis. Master Sergeant Rodriguez stood immediately. Ma'am, that's inappropriate speculation. Noted, Master Sergeant, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes replied sharply. Major Voss, confine your remarks to relevant questions for the private. Major Voss nodded in acknowledgement. Private Chun, in your assessment as a signals intelligence specialist, was there anything about the communications you intercepted that would have indicated the current threat level to search operations? Maya looked directly at the main tactical display for the first time. The communications pattern suggested coordinated hostile activity beyond normal levels. That wasn't my question. Based on what you intercepted, should search operations have been modified? Based on the communications I analyzed, yes. But my assessment was not included in operational planning. Major Voss's expression hardened. Are you suggesting that intelligence information was deliberately ignored by command staff? I'm stating that the linguistic analysis I provided differed significantly from the threat assessment that was distributed to search teams. The command center stirred with murmurs. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes tapped his pen once against his desk, restoring order. Private Chun, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes said, his voice tight with growing impatience. You'll need to explain that assertion clearly and audibly for the command staff. What specifically was different about your analysis? Maya paused, her eyes scanning the command center briefly before returning to the colonel. When she spoke, her voice remained soft, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. My linguistic analysis indicated that the militia communications referenced a specific high-value target, using terminology normally reserved for captured American personnel. That information was not included in the threat briefing provided to search teams. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's head snapped up, his carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time. The gray-haired colonel's expression darkened as he studied Maya with new intensity. Private Chun, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes said firmly, frustration evident in his tone. This is the final time I will ask you to speak louder. The entire command staff must be able to hear intelligence reports accurately. Maya looked directly at Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it with professional detachment. The veteran colonel in the command center was now gripping his workstation, his knuckles white. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes finally interrupted with visible impatience, leaning forward at his command console. Private Chen, we don't have all night. Speak louder, or we'll move on to other intelligence sources. The command center fell silent. For the first time since beginning her report, Maya looked directly at Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it. The gray-haired colonel near the tactical display leaned forward, his hands gripping his workstation. Suddenly, an urgent transmission crackled through the main communication system in a rapid, panicked voice speaking what sounded like a regional Afghan dialect. The transmission was brief, heavily distorted, and cut off abruptly. The communications technician looked confused, adjusting his equipment. "Anyone copy that transmission?" Lieutenant Colonel Hayes called out. "Language analysis?" The communications bay fell silent as analysts shrugged or shook their heads. The transmission had been too fast, too distorted, and in a dialect none of the standard linguists recognized. Maya leaned closer to her microphone and spoke clearly in the same dialect, then translated in English. "American woman held in compound. Grid reference 41, Sierra, 7792. Request immediate extraction. Time running short." The effect was immediate and electric. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's pen fell from his fingers, clattering loudly on his desk. Several intelligence officers physically straightened at their workstations as if receiving an urgent tasking. Major Voss's face drained of color. The gray-haired colonel near the tactical display stood up involuntarily, then slowly sat back down. Complete silence fell over the command center as recognition dawned across various faces. Some looked confused, others shocked, and a few, those who understood the significance of what they had just heard, appeared stricken. Maya continued in her normal soft voice, but now everyone was straining to hear. "That transmission was in Waki, a high-altitude dialect from the Afghan-Pakistan border region. I was the linguist attached to Special Operations Task Force Phantom 3 years ago. I was also the sole survivor of Operation Silent Thunder, which Colonel Hayes personally authorized 2 years before Captain Santos went missing." She methodically produced a worn, waterproof communication device from her cargo pocket and held it up for the command staff to see. "This contains encrypted communication logs from Operation Silent Thunder, not the sanitized reports filed with command. Captain Santos isn't lost due to navigation error. She's being held by the same militia network that captured and killed my team after we discovered their connection to weapons trafficking across the Pakistan border." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes attempted to call for order, but found his voice failing him. "Private Chun, this is highly irregular procedure for intelligence reporting. My team and I were declared Kia in Operation Silent Thunder," Maya continued calmly. "I was the only survivor. I've spent 2 years working under an assumed identity and waiting for another operation to intersect with the same criminal network, not for revenge, but to prevent other soldiers from walking into the same trap." A younger intelligence analyst near the communications bay stood up. "This is absurd. Specialist Rodriguez died in Operation Silent Thunder. I processed her casualty report myself." The gray-haired colonel turned to address him. "Sit down, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "Look at her linguistic skills. No one forgets a voice like that." Maya opened her communication device to reveal frequency logs, coordinate references, and coded message traffic. "My team was abandoned because we discovered Colonel Werner Bradshaw was facilitating weapons transfers to tribal militias through a private contracting network, the same network that provided the false intelligence that sent Captain Santos into an ambush." The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes tapped his pen repeatedly on his desk, finally restoring some semblance of order. His face had lost all color, and his hand trembled visibly. "This command center will pause current operations for 30 minutes, he declared, his voice unsteady. But before anyone could move, Maya spoke again. "With respect, Colonel, Captain Santos has been missing for 72 hours. I've waited 2 years to speak, but she doesn't have time for bureaucratic procedures." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes slowly leaned back in his chair, his authority visibly shaken. He nodded once, a gesture of reluctant permission. "Operation Silent Thunder was classified above top secret," Maya continued. "Our mission was to identify the source of American weapons appearing in tribal conflicts along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. We traced the weapons to a distribution network operating from a compound near Torkham. What we found there was a sophisticated trafficking operation with financial records linking directly to Colonel Bradshaw and his private contracting firm." She turned her communication device and removed an encrypted data chip. "This contains transaction records, weapons serial numbers, and bank transfer information. We transmitted this intelligence before we were compromised. That transmission was intercepted and our extraction was canceled. Our team was left to die." Major Voss stood, her voice hollow. I received direct confirmation from Colonel Bradshaw that Silent Thunder Team had been confirmed Kia. The extraction was called off due to impossible tactical conditions. We weren't dead, Maya said simply. We were very much alive and calling for immediate extraction. I heard your voice on the command frequency, Major Voss. You sounded confused, but you relayed the abort order. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached Maya cautiously. Specialist Rodriguez, if what you're saying is true, how did you survive? And why assume a false identity for 2 years? Maya's composure never wavered. I survived because I was separated from my team during the final assault on our position. I was wounded, unconscious, presumed dead along with the others. Local villagers found me and kept me hidden while I recovered. By the time I was functional again, the official story was established. My team was dead, the mission had never existed, and Colonel Bradshaw had been promoted to Pentagon staff. She looked around the command center, meeting the eyes of several senior staff members. I needed time to gather evidence that couldn't be easily buried again. I needed to understand who knew about the weapons trafficking and who was simply following compromised orders. Most importantly, I needed to make sure no other soldiers would die because of the same corruption. The gray-haired colonel approached the central briefing area. Sir, request permission to address the command staff. I am Colonel Marcus Webb, retired Special Operations. I was the training officer for the Silent Thunder team. He turned to face Maya. Specialist Rodriguez was one of the finest linguists I ever worked with. If she says her team was betrayed, I believe her without question. Major Voss interjected. This is all highly dramatic, but it has no direct bearing on current operations. Captain Santos is missing due to tactical circumstances, not some conspiracy from years ago. They're connected, Maya replied. Captain Santos's convoy was deliberately ambushed because her unit was getting too close to the same weapons trafficking network. History repeating itself. Different team, same betrayal, same source. She pulled another document from her communication device. This is an intelligence summary showing that Captain Santos requested additional security protocols 3 times before her final mission. She was told explicitly that requesting additional support would delay critical operations. She wasn't careless. She was set up. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes studied the document, his command demeanor cracking further. These intelligence requests weren't included in the operational briefing I received, because they were deliberately removed, Maya said, just like the linguistic intelligence I provided was removed from current threat assessments. And just like the weapons trafficking evidence was removed from Operation Silent Thunder after my team was eliminated. The command center had grown absolutely still. Every person present was aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the communications technicians had stopped their routine monitoring, staring at Maya with undisguised astonishment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached the command console. Sir, in light of this new intelligence, I recommend immediate revision of search operations and potentially reassessing Captain Santos's tactical situation. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded absently, his attention still fixed on Maya. Granted, all search operations will implement enhanced security protocols immediately. He paused, then added, Specialist Rodriguez will remain under command protection until these matters are resolved. As staff began coordinating the operational changes, Maya spoke again. There's something else you should know, Colonel. She removed a final document from her communication device. This is the original authorization for Operation Silent Thunder with your signature. And this, she produced another paper, is the abort order that condemned my team. The authorizing signatures don't match. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes took both documents with trembling hands. Someone forged my signature on the abort order, he whispered, shock evident in his voice. Yes, Maya confirmed. You've been carrying guilt for a decision you never made. The abort order came directly from Colonel Bradshaw's office. The retired Colonel Webb moved closer. I always questioned why you would abandon that team, Marcus. It didn't align with anything I knew about your operational philosophy. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes looked up, visible emotion crossing his face. I've spent 2 years believing I made a call that got 5 good soldiers killed. I authorized the mission, but I never authorized abandoning them to die. The doors to the command center opened, and a team of military investigators entered, led by a stern-faced full colonel. What is the meaning of this security alert? The colonel demanded. Colonel Hayes, I'm Colonel Patricia Foster from the Criminal Investigation Division. We received an anonymous intelligence package yesterday containing evidence of serious breaches of military law involving Colonel Bradshaw and weapons trafficking. I understand there may be connected intelligence being reported in this command center. Maya smiled faintly. Right on schedule, she murmured. Colonel Foster approached her. You would be Specialist Rodriguez, formerly of Silent Thunder. I would be. We have extensive questions for you, Specialist. Starting with how you survived and why you assumed false identity. And I have answers, Colonel. 2 years' worth. The Colonel turned to address Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. With your permission, I'd like to take custody of the intelligence Specialist Rodriguez has provided and arrange for her protection pending a full investigation. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded. Granted, but I want to be kept fully informed of any intelligence relating to Captain Santos's current situation. Of course, Colonel. It appears several ongoing operations have been compromised by the same source. The command center began to clear of non-essential personnel, but Major Voss remained at her workstation, looking shell-shocked. Maya approached her quietly. I don't understand, Voss said, looking up at her. Why would you help with Santos's rescue? I'm the one who relayed the abort order that left your team to die. Because you were another victim of the same corruption, Maya replied simply. You followed what you believed were legitimate orders from a trusted superior. The guilt should rest with those who manipulated you, not those who were deceived. How can you be so certain I wasn't involved? Maya allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Because I've spent 2 years studying every detail of what happened. I know who gave the orders and why. I know who altered intelligence reports and who profited from the weapons sales. Most importantly, I know you requested confirmation twice because you suspected something was wrong with the abort order. Major Voss's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? Those communications were classified. I had help, Maya. Admitted. Not everyone in the intelligence community was compromised. There are still good people within the system who wanted the truth to come out, and who wanted to prevent other soldiers from dying because of corruption. As she prepared to leave with Colonel Foster, the retired Colonel Webb approached. Specialist, he said formally, then dropped his voice. Maya, we held a memorial service. I spoke about your dedication to the mission. I know, she replied quietly. I read the transcript online. Thank you for honoring our sacrifice. What happens to Captain Santos now? Maya looked at the tactical display showing the search grid coordinates. Now we mount a real rescue operation with accurate intelligence and proper support. She still has a chance because someone finally told the truth. The command center remained suspended in a moment of shocked revelation. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes slowly stood from his command console and removed his rank insignia, setting them on his desk before stepping down to stand on the same level as Maya. This command recognizes Specialist Maya Rodriguez, presumed killed in action, recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor, he announced formally, his voice carrying a weight of regret and respect. The retired Colonel Webb approached Maya and rendered a perfect salute. Others throughout the command center followed suit, a ripple of silent acknowledgement spreading through the room. Intelligence personnel who had moments ago regarded her with skepticism now stood at attention, honoring a fallen comrade returned from the dead. Major Voss, visibly shaken, stood to address Maya directly. I never knew who actually gave that abort order. I've been carrying this guilt for 2 years, believing I contributed to your team's death. I know, Maya replied. Your voice on the command frequency that day. I heard your hesitation. You questioned the order. Twice, Voss confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. They told me I was risking additional lives by questioning operational decisions, that the intelligence had confirmed the entire team had been eliminated in the initial assault. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's professional demeanor cracked as he turned to face the command staff. I authorized Operation Silent Thunder based on weapons trafficking intelligence that indicated a high-priority target. I did not authorize the abandonment order that came later. The signature was forged. You've been living with guilt that was never yours to bear, Maya confirmed. Colonel Bradshaw used your command authority to cover his own criminal activities. Colonel Foster stepped forward. Colonel Hayes, I'd like to request a formal suspension of current operations while we secure this evidence and establish proper protocols for what happens next. This has implications for multiple ongoing operations and potentially dozens of personnel. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded. Current operations will continue with enhanced security protocols, but all intelligence assessments will be immediately reviewed for potential compromise. He paused. Major Voss, in light of the evidence presented, you are relieved of any responsibility for the Silent Thunder incident pending complete review of the circumstances. As military investigators began securing the command center and escorting people to debriefing areas, Maya opened her communication device and carefully displayed photographs showing Colonel Bradshaw meeting with known weapons dealers and tribal militia leaders. This was never about punishment, she said softly, addressing the room at large. It was about preventing other soldiers from dying because of corruption and about making sure Captain Santos gets the support she needs to come home alive. As she descended from the briefing area, her shadow stretched long behind her across the command center floor, the shadow of a soldier standing at attention rather than a junior enlisted radio operator. For a moment, she paused to look back at the tactical displays showing Captain Santos's rescue operation in progress. The intelligence staff was coordinating with proper information for the first time in years. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was directing operations with restored confidence in his intelligence sources. Major Voss was working to identify other potentially compromised assessments. Colonel Webb watched her from near the command console, his face reflecting a complex mix of pride and determination. Maya gave him a small nod before continuing toward the exit with Colonel Foster. Her mission wasn't quite complete. There would be extensive debriefings, formal investigations, and probably congressional hearings. The full scope of the corruption would need to be exposed, and those responsible held accountable at every level. But the most important part was accomplished. The truth was out, and soldiers could once again trust that their intelligence support was working to protect them rather than serve criminal interests. As she reached the command center exit, a communications technician approached. Specialist Rodriguez, Colonel Foster has arranged secure transportation for your continued protection. If you'll come this way. She followed the technician toward the exit, conscious of the eyes following her progress. Command staff, intelligence analysts, communications personnel. For 2 years, she had lived invisibly, unremarkable and unnoticed, gathering evidence while pretending to be someone else. Now she walked openly, her identity reclaimed, her purpose fulfilled. The older veteran caught up with her just before she reached the exit corridor. Specialist, he said quietly. What you did, surviving, maintaining your cover, gathering evidence, coming forward at the right moment, it was extraordinary. I had a duty to my team and to the soldiers who came after us, she replied simply. It was more than duty, he insisted. It was courage of the highest order, an intelligence work of a quality that saved lives. Maya allowed herself a small smile. You taught us well, Colonel. I taught you procedures and protocols, he corrected. What you demonstrated today, that came from within. He watched her leave with the investigative team, then turned to Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had joined them. Some heroes never get the recognition they deserve, he said quietly. They just carry the weight of protecting others. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded, watching Maya's figure disappear down the corridor. And some truths are worth waiting years to hear. The morning light continued to strengthen as Maya's escort vehicle pulled away from forward operating base Sentinel. Behind her, the command center buzzed with renewed purpose as Captain Santos's rescue operation moved forward with proper intelligence support and adequate resources. The intelligence staff worked with restored confidence, knowing their assessments would reach operational commanders without criminal interference. Ahead lay the challenge of ensuring complete justice was served, and that the full scope of the weapons trafficking network was exposed and dismantled. But for now, in this moment between what was hidden and what would be revealed, the simple act of speaking truth had transformed a routine communications watch into something profound. The power of one soldier's quiet determination to honor fallen comrades and protect those who came after, even when it meant sacrificing years of her own life, to gather the evidence necessary to expose a betrayal that powerful forces had tried to bury forever. As her vehicle reached the main gate, Maya's radio crackled with an update from the command center. Rescue Team Alpha has established contact with Captain Santos. She's alive and secure. Extraction in progress. Maya closed her eyes and smiled for the first time in 2 years, knowing that this time, no one would be left behind.